You ever sit at a table with people who share your blood and realize they don't see you as family, just competition? That was my life. Every dinner, every gathering, another reminder that I was the one who didn't make it. No fancy car, no six-figure job, no big house with the polished lawn. Just me, Ethan Cole, the brother who tried too hard, the one they loved to joke about. I used to laugh it off, pretending it didn't sting, but it did. Because behind their smirks, I saw something they didn't think I'd notice. Fear. They feared that one day I'd figure it out, that the kid they laughed at would grow quiet, disappear for a while, and come back unrecognizable. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't argue. I didn't explain my plans. I built in silence, brick by brick, deal by deal, failure by failure. And when I came back, I didn't have to say a word. They saw it in my eyes, the look of a man who'd eaten every insult and turned it into fuel. I still remember that night, the sound of forks clinking against plates, the faint hum of jazz playing from the speaker, the smell of my mother's roast beef filling the room. To anyone else, it might have looked like a normal family dinner, but to me, it was the night I learned that silence can cut deeper than words. My two brothers sat across from me, Daniel, the oldest, always talking like he owned the air in the room, and Ryan, the golden child, the one who could make a mess look like success. They'd both made it, or so they liked to remind everyone. Daniel leaned back in his chair, tie loosened, his Rolex glinting in the warm light. "So Ethan," he said, in that voice that always sounded like a compliment but wasn't, "how's the business going? Still trying to build something from scratch, huh?" He said it with that same smirk I'd seen 1,000 times, the one that said, "You'll never catch up." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head as he reached for the wine. "Man, I give you credit for trying," he said. "You've got guts, but you should just join something solid, you know? A real company. Settle down. Not everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur." Everyone laughed. Even my mom, awkwardly, like she didn't want to pick sides. My dad just kept cutting his steak, pretending not to hear. That was his thing. Stay quiet, stay comfortable. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I didn't trust what would come out if I spoke. I looked down at my plate, my food untouched. The truth was, things were rough. The business was barely alive. My savings were gone. I'd sold my car. And most days, I felt like I was holding a match against a hurricane. But they didn't know that, and I sure as hell wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. Daniel raised his glass. "To success," he said. Everyone echoed him. To success, except me. I didn't raise my glass. I just stared at it, watching the reflection of the chandelier shimmer in the wine, wondering when exactly they'd stopped seeing me as their brother and started seeing me as proof of what they'd done right. Then came the part that broke something in me. Ryan leaned in and said, "You know what I think, Ethan? I think you're addicted to struggle. You like the idea of fighting for something. But not everyone who fights wins, man. Some just tire themselves out." He said it with a smile. But that smile, it was worse than a slap. I wanted to tell him that I'd been waking up at 4 a.m. every day for 2 years, that I'd eaten canned soup for dinner more times than I could count, that I'd walked miles to save gas, skipped birthdays, missed dates, worked jobs I hated just to keep the dream breathing. But none of that would have mattered, because they didn't care about the process, only the result. And in their eyes, I was losing, so I swallowed it. Every word, every ounce of anger, every drop of pride, because that's what men do, right? We take the hits, smile and say, "I'm good." When dinner ended, I helped Mom with the dishes while the others laughed in the living room. She glanced at me, concern in her eyes. "Don't let them get to you, sweetheart," she said quietly. I nodded, pretending not to care, but inside, I was burning. When I stepped outside that night, the air was cold, sharp, and honest, the way people rarely are. I stood by my car, looking up at the sky, my reflection caught faintly in the window, and for the first time, I said it out loud. "They don't believe in me, but I do." I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I swore that night, the next time we sat at that table, I wouldn't need to defend myself. My results would do the talking. That was the last dinner I attended for 3 years. The next time they saw me, the laughter had stopped. And that silence, that beautiful stunned silence, was everything I'd ever worked for. But that's getting ahead of the story, because before I became the man they couldn't laugh at, I had to become the man no one saw coming. And that part, that grind, that quiet storm, started the very next morning. When I woke up the next morning, the house was still silent. The kind of silence that feels like it's watching you. My phone buzzed twice, messages from Daniel and Ryan in the family group chat. A meme about failed startups. A picture of Ryan's new car. 2 words from Daniel, "Keep grinding." It's funny how people can laugh at your pain and call it motivation. I sat there at the edge of the bed, staring at the sunlight bleeding through the curtains. My apartment looked like my life, half finished, half furnished, held together by hope and duct tape. I'd been trying for 2 years to build something that no one else could see, a small media startup. Just me, my camera, and a laptop that sounded like it was dying every time it rendered a file, but to them it was nothing. A hobby, a fantasy, a phase. That morning, I realized I was done explaining myself. I made coffee, black, bitter, and cheap, and opened my notebook. On the first page were ideas, scribbles, numbers, timelines, but on the very top, I wrote 3 new words in all caps: disappear, build, return. That was it, the plan. No big speech, no dramatic post online, no announcement, just action. I sold almost everything I owned: the TV, the couch, the guitar I never learned to play. I canceled my lease and moved to a tiny studio above a mechanic's shop across town. One window, one desk, one goal. I stopped going to family dinners, stopped answering calls, stopped scrolling through other people's success. For a while it was lonely. Not the kind of loneliness where you want company, the kind where you want proof that you're not wasting your time. Every day started the same: 5 a.m. wake up, cold shower, instant coffee, and 12 hours of work. Editing videos, learning marketing, failing, retrying, failing again. Some nights, the hunger hit hard. Not just for food, for validation. For someone to look at me and say, "You're doing the right thing." But no one did. And in that silence, something changed. I stopped waiting for permission. I stopped needing applause. I stopped asking, "What if I fail?" Instead, I started asking, "What if I don't?" Months went by. Winter turned to spring. The business started to breathe again. Small contracts, local clients, word-of-mouth gigs. Enough to survive, not yet enough to thrive, but it was mine. Every win, every loss, every bruise had my name on it. One night, I sat at my desk watching the city lights flicker outside. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. Tired eyes, unshaven face, clothes that smelled like coffee, and camera batteries. And I smiled, because for the first time, I didn't see failure. I saw foundation. Then came the break I didn't see coming. A local business called, small brand, tight budget, but they'd seen one of my videos online, said they loved my storytelling, asked if I could shoot something for them. Authentic, emotional, real. I said yes without thinking, shot it in 2 days, edited it in 3. When they released it, it went viral in our city. Thousands of views overnight. Emails poured in. Suddenly, my inbox was full, not of rejection, but opportunity. I remember just staring at the screen, my heart pounding, whispering to myself, "This is it. Not this is luck, not this is my moment, but this is proof." Still, I didn't tell my family. Not yet. I wasn't ready for their congratulations, not the kind that comes after doubt. Instead, I kept working. Bigger clients came. I built a small team, upgraded equipment, moved into a real office. The same people who once ignored my calls now wanted to collaborate. And one evening, 3 years later, I got a message from Ryan. It just said, "Hey, Mom's birthday dinner this weekend. You coming? It's been a while." I stared at the text for a long time. Then I typed back, "Yeah, I'll be there." That was it. No anger, no attitude, just peace, the kind that comes when you've earned your silence. I closed my laptop, looked around my office, the logo on the wall glowing softly. Cole Studios, my name, my work, my proof. I wasn't the dreamer anymore. I wasn't the broke one. I was the man who vanished and returned on his own terms. And that dinner, the one I was about to walk into, that was going to be the moment they finally understood what quiet ambition looks like when it roars. When I pulled into my parents' driveway that evening, the sun was folding itself behind the trees, turning everything gold. For a second, it felt like nothing had changed. The same cracked pavement, the same porch light that always flickered, the same wind chime Mom refused to replace. But it wasn't the same, because I wasn't the same. I sat there with the engine running, hands on the steering wheel, listening to it idle. 3 years ago, I'd left this place with a half-broken car, $300, and a dream that everyone thought was a joke. Now I was back in a tailored jacket that actually fit, keys to a new car, and a business that paid for both. But the weird thing was, none of that mattered as much as I thought it would. I wasn't here to prove anything anymore. I just wanted to see if I could sit at that table and feel peace instead of pain. I killed the engine and stepped out. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes, clean shoes this time, not the scuffed ones I used to hide under the table. Through the window I saw silhouettes moving inside. Laughter, the clinking of glasses, Ryan's loud voice carrying through the walls. Same rhythm, same show, only the audience had changed. When I knocked, Mom opened the door. For a moment she just stared, eyes soft, a little watery like she was seeing a ghost. Then she smiled, pulled me in and whispered, "You look different." "I feel different," I said, and I meant it. The smell of dinner hit me, garlic bread, roasted chicken, the same comfort that used to make me feel like an outsider in my own home. Ryan was at the table, phone in hand, wearing one of those casual rich guy smiles that says I've got it all together. Daniel was pouring wine, already half a glass ahead. When they looked up and saw me, it was like time stalled. Ryan blinked. "Ethan? Wow, you actually came." "Yeah," I said. "Didn't want to miss Mom's birthday." Daniel gave a short laugh, the kind people use to test the air. "Man, look at you. You clean up nice." It was meant to sound friendly. It still had an edge, but I let it roll off. Old me would have shrunk. New me just smiled and sat down. Dinner started. The conversation moved like a river I'd already drowned in once. Work stories, vacations, humble brags disguised as advice. I listened, nodded, and kept my voice calm. No need to flex. Silence was doing enough for me. At one point, Ryan leaned back and said, "So Ethan, what have you been up to? We never hear from you anymore." I wiped my mouth, took a sip of water. "Working," I said. "Building." "Building what?" Daniel asked, half laughing. "Another one of your projects?" I smiled. "Something like that." Ryan grinned. "Still chasing the dream, huh?" I set down my fork. "No." I caught it. The table went quiet. Not dramatic, just heavy. Mom froze halfway through cutting her food, eyes darting between us. Dad looked up for the first time that night, the faintest hint of curiosity behind his glasses. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, laying it face up on the table. On the screen was a photo of the team, my team, standing in front of our new office, our company logo glowing on the glass, Cole Studios. The caption beneath it read, "Named one of the top 10 creative startups of the year." Ryan's fork slipped from his hand. Daniel blinked twice. "Wait, this is yours?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "Started small, took a few years, but it's doing all right." Ryan leaned closer, scrolling through the post. "Holy," he caught himself. "You're serious." "Always was," I said. No arrogance, no gloating, just truth. Mom reached across the table and put her hand on mine. "I knew you'd make it, sweetheart." Her voice cracked a little. Daniel cleared his throat. "So, what exactly do you do now?" I told them, not the bragging version, just the real one. How I built from my bedroom, how I learned to edit, market, pitch, fail, recover, how I ate noodles for months and kept going, how I turned one small video into a career. By the time I finished, the table was quiet again, but not the awkward kind. It was the sound of people recalculating everything they thought they knew about you. Ryan finally spoke. "You know," he said slowly, "I used to think you were wasting your time." "I know," I said. He nodded, looked down at his plate. "Guess I was wrong." Daniel exhaled through his nose, that half laugh gone. "You ever think about expanding? We could invest or—" I shook my head gently. "Appreciate it, but I'm good." For once he didn't have a comeback. We finished dinner with small talk, but the air had shifted. The jokes stopped, the teasing disappeared, and every time I caught one of them glancing at me, it wasn't mockery anymore, it was respect. After dessert, I stepped outside. The night was cool, the sky clear. Ryan followed me out, hands in his pockets. He stood there for a second, kicking a pebble. "You really did it, huh?" "Still doing it," I said. He nodded. "I guess I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me anything," I said. "Just don't underestimate the quiet ones." He laughed softly. "Fair." We stood there in silence, two brothers who finally saw each other for who they were, not who they'd been. Inside, I could hear Mom laughing with Dad. For once it sounded like home again. As I drove away, the same driveway that used to feel like an escape now felt like closure. The streetlights flashed across my windshield, one by one, like checkpoints in a race I'd already finished. And somewhere between one light and the next, I realized the real victory wasn't that they respected me now, it was that I no longer needed them to. I'll never forget that night, the one that flipped my entire story upside down. It was winter, 3 years after that chaotic Thanksgiving, when my brothers called me a charity case. I was living in a small one-bedroom apartment downtown, the kind of place where the heat worked only if you whispered nice things to the radiator. I was broke, sure, but I was hungry. I worked my full-time job at the hardware store during the day, and at night I was building something of my own, a small online business I believed could change everything. The idea came from frustration, a way to help blue-collar workers find side gigs and freelance jobs without having to fake degrees or lie about who they were. Simple, honest, real. Something for guys like me who had more grit than luck. I called it Workline. I was teaching myself how to code through YouTube tutorials, living off instant noodles and black coffee. I'd fall asleep at 3 a.m. on my laptop, sometimes waking up with the keyboard imprinted on my cheek. It was painful, lonely, and I questioned myself every night. But then one night, as I sat in that dim room surrounded by empty mugs, I got a notification. Workline has received its first job post. One single job. But to me, it felt like a million. I remember staring at the screen and laughing like a madman. Not because it was success, but because it was proof. Proof that something I built from nothing could move, could breathe, could matter. That one job led to 3, then 10, then 100. By the end of the first month, I had over 500 users, but I didn't tell a soul, not my brothers, not my parents, not even the guys at work. I stayed quiet. I learned to let silence work for me. Then one morning, I got an email from a startup investor. He said he'd seen my project online and wanted to meet. I thought it was a scam, some phishing scheme to steal my $20 savings. But I met him anyway. His name was Marcus Green, a tall guy in a gray suit with a kind of energy that filled the room. He asked me one question: "What made you start this?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Because I got tired of waiting for someone to believe in me." He smiled. Good answer. That week, Marcus offered me $50,000 in seed funding. I swear my hands shook as I signed that first check. I could hear my brothers' voices echoing in my head. The broke one, the dreamer. I just smiled. For months I disappeared into my work. I built, refined, expanded. Work lines started to grow faster than I could keep up. Suddenly I wasn't some small-town kid with calloused hands and empty pockets. I was a founder. But success didn't just change my bank account, it started changing me too. I learned how to carry myself differently. I stopped explaining my dreams to people who only listened to reply. I started protecting my energy, and that's when people noticed. My old friends started calling, "Hey man, saw your site. Looks cool." My brothers? Still silent. But silence has a funny way of speaking volumes, because one day, that silence broke, and when it did, it changed everything again. It was a crisp autumn morning when I got a call from my mom. Her voice was soft, almost trembling. "Ethan," she said, "your brother Ryan just got laid off. They're struggling." I didn't know who else to ask. I froze. Ryan, the same brother who told me I'd never make it, who laughed when I said I wanted to build something of my own, was now jobless. And my mother, the woman who'd once said, "Your brothers are just being realistic," was now asking me for help. That was the moment I realized how far I'd come, not just financially, but emotionally. The kid they once mocked for dreaming now had the power to help them survive. And the truth, I didn't feel revenge. I felt clarity. Because real success isn't about rubbing it in their faces. It's about outgrowing the need to. But still, part of me, that small scarred part, wanted them to see, to finally understand who I had become. So when the next family dinner came around, I decided to go. And I'll never forget the look on their faces when I walked through that door. It had been nearly 4 years since I last sat at that table, the same oak table where every insult, every jab, and every reminder of my supposed failures had once echoed louder than my own thoughts. But this time, I wasn't walking in with excuses. I was walking in with silence, success, and scars no one could see. When I pulled up to my parents' house that evening, the driveway looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just grown, not in height, but in everything else that mattered. My brothers' cars were already parked outside, shiny and expensive-looking, but I knew the truth. One of them was leased, and the other belonged more to the bank than to him. I stood there for a minute, holding a bottle of wine I'd brought, not to impress, but out of respect for the woman who'd raised me. The air smelled like roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, and nostalgia. But beneath all that warmth, there was tension, a quiet storm waiting to break. When I walked in, Mom was the first to see me. Her face lit up, genuine as always, but behind her smile was something else: guilt. She hugged me tight, like she was trying to erase all the years of silence in one squeeze. "Ethan," she whispered, "I'm so glad you came. Wouldn't miss it," I said softly. Then came Ryan, my oldest brother. He'd gained weight, a little tired around the eyes, wearing a polo that probably used to fit better. He looked at me for a moment, like he wasn't sure which version of me to expect, the dreamer he once mocked, or the man who built what they said was impossible. "Well, if it isn't the golden boy," he said with a smirk. "I saw your interview on CNBC. Guess you finally made it, huh?" His tone tried to sound casual, but the bitterness bled through every syllable. "Yeah," I said, sitting down. "Took a while, but I did." The younger one, Kyle, laughed nervously. "Man, you really did. I saw Workline trending on LinkedIn last week. Congrats." "Thanks," I replied, smiling slightly. "It's been a ride." Dinner started quietly. The clinking of forks and glasses filled the silence that none of us dared to break. It was almost peaceful, until Ryan leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, Mom still brags about you. Says you're the pride of the family now." I looked at him, trying to gauge whether that was praise or poison. "That's kind of her," I said. He smirked. "Yeah, funny how the kid we used to call the dreamer turned out to be the rich one. Guess the world's got a sense of humor." Mom shot him a sharp look, but I raised my hand slightly. "It's all right," I said calmly. "You were right, though. Back then I was just dreaming. The difference is, I never stopped." He froze for a moment, his fork halfway to his mouth. "I didn't argue with you," I continued, "because I realized something. Sometimes you can't convince people who've already decided you'll lose. You just have to go out there and prove them wrong." The room fell silent. Even Kyle stopped fidgeting. I could feel years of frustration pressing on my chest, the endless comparisons, the laughter, the judgment. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was past it. I used to think success would feel like revenge, I said, my voice steady. Like I'd finally get to throw everything you said back in your faces. But it doesn't. It feels like peace. Because I don't need to win against you anymore. I just needed to win against who I used to be. Ryan looked down, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white around his fork. Must be nice, he muttered. Some of us don't have the luxury of peace. Some of us still have bills and problems. And don't, I interrupted, quietly but firmly. Don't turn this into a competition of pain. You had every chance I had. You just didn't believe you could do it. And that's not my fault. The table went still. My mother's eyes glistened with tears. Kyle shifted uncomfortably. And Ryan just sat there, staring at me like he was looking at a ghost of the brother he used to know. The one he could push around, laugh at, diminish. But that version of me was gone. I reached into my jacket and slid an envelope across the table toward him. What's this? He asked, confused. Your new start, I said simply. It's a job offer. Work lines expanding into your area, and I need someone who knows logistics. I put your name forward. You'll have to earn it. No favors, no shortcuts. But if you're serious, it's yours. His eyes darted between me and the envelope, like he didn't know whether to be insulted or grateful. Why? He asked, almost whispering. After everything I said to you? Because that's what real success is, Ryan, I said. It's not about winning. It's about lifting. Even the ones who doubted you. The room went silent again. This time, it wasn't awkward. It was heavy, emotional, real. Kyle cleared his throat. Man, Ethan, I don't even know what to say. I smiled faintly. You don't have to say anything. Just stop laughing at the ones who are trying. You never know who's about to build something big. When dinner ended, I stepped outside to breathe. The night air was cold, sharp, but it felt clean. I looked back through the window, saw Ryan staring at that envelope, Mom wiping tears, Kyle lost in thought. For the first time in years, the silence around me wasn't painful. It was peaceful. It was earned. I walked to my car, opened the door, and before getting in, I looked up at the stars, the same stars that had watched me cry in the dark years ago, the same ones that had listened when no one else did. And I whispered, they don't laugh anymore. Then I smiled, got in, and drove off. Not as the dreamer they mocked, but as the man who proved that the quiet ones often roar the loudest.
3 years later, if someone had told me that my story, the same one that started with being laughed at in my own home, would someday be told on a global stage, I would have laughed too. But life has a strange sense of poetry. The same voices that once mocked you end up echoing your words. The same people who dismissed you end up quoting you. It was late spring, the air warm with promise. I stood backstage at a leadership summit in Chicago, the kind of event I used to watch on live streams when I was broke and eating noodles in my tiny apartment. Now I was the keynote speaker. The LED screen behind the curtain flashed my name in bold white letters. Ethan Cross, founder and CEO of Workline. I adjusted my cufflinks, took a deep breath and peeked through the curtain. The room was packed. Hundreds of faces, camera lights blinking like stars. But my eyes froze when I saw two people sitting in the fourth row. Ryan and Kyle, my brothers. They were sitting quietly, both dressed in suits. Not perfect fits, but decent enough that I could tell they'd tried. It hit me like a punch to the chest. The last time we'd been in the same room, I was still proving myself. Now I was about to walk on stage and tell the world what those nights of ridicule had taught me. The host's voice echoed, "Please welcome, Ethan Cross." Applause filled the hall as I stepped out under the bright lights. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I looked at that crowd, then back down at the two men who once made me feel like I'd never belong. But all I felt now was calm. "Thank you," I began, gripping the mic. You know, people love talking about success. The shiny part. The cars, the numbers, the applause, but no one talks about the nights it's built on. The nights when everyone doubts you, when your own family laughs, when silence feels like your only friend. A few heads nodded in the crowd. Some men looked down. I could tell they'd lived those same nights. I used to think I had to prove them wrong, I continued, that if I made enough money, earned enough recognition, they'd finally respect me. But that's not what happened. What happened was, I learned to respect myself. That's when everything changed. The crowd went silent. I learned that silence is power, that you don't need to scream your worth to anyone. Sometimes you just keep building, brick by brick, until one day, the walls they boxed you in with become the foundation of your empire. Applause swelled slowly, not thunderous, but honest, the kind that comes from people who feel it. I smiled, looking straight at my brothers. And if you're sitting here tonight thinking you've been underestimated, mocked, or told you'll never be the successful one, don't argue. Don't beg them to see you. Just build. Build until they can't ignore you. Build until your silence is louder than their laughter. The room erupted. People stood, clapping, whistling. I saw a few men wiping tears, but all I could see were my brothers, still seated. Ryan was staring straight at me, his eyes glassy, his jaw trembling. And then slowly, he stood up. The applause grew louder. Kyle followed. They didn't clap. They didn't smile. They just looked at me with something I'd waited my whole life to see. Respect. Not the kind you demand, the kind you earn. After the event, I stepped outside, needing a breath. The Chicago air was cool, the city alive around me. I was watching the lights shimmer on the river when I heard footsteps behind me. It was Ryan. He stood beside me quietly, hands in his pockets. "You killed it up there," he said softly. "Thanks," I replied. He hesitated, then said, "You know, I used to laugh because I didn't understand you. I thought dreaming meant running away. But you turned it into something real." I looked at him, the same brother who once broke my confidence, now breaking his pride. "It's all right," I said. "We all grow up differently. Some of us need time to see what others already believe." He nodded. "You helped me, Ethan. That job at Workline, it gave me a new start. I'm good at it, you know." "I know," I said. "I wouldn't have hired you otherwise." We both laughed, softly, genuinely, for the first time in years. Then he said, "You were right. Silence is power." I turned toward the skyline, my heart heavy but full. "Yeah," I whispered, "and forgiveness is freedom." For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, two brothers who had finally stopped being enemies of each other, and of themselves. I knew then that the story had come full circle, not because I'd won, but because I'd healed. Later that night, as I lay in my hotel room, scrolling through messages from people, saying how my story inspired them, I realized something deeper. This story wasn't just mine, it was ours. Every man who'd ever been laughed at, every man who'd ever been underestimated, every man who'd ever stayed up late building something no one believed in. This was their victory too. And before I closed my eyes, I recorded a message for my viewers. If you've ever been called a dreamer, a loser, or a fool, don't fight it. Let them talk. Let them laugh. Just build. Because one day, the same people who doubted you will lean in to listen. And that day, my friend, they'll regret it.